They say blood is thicker than water, but no one tells you that sometimes blood can drown you. I'm Eleanor Hartwell, and I'm 75 years old. For months, I watched my own grandchildren, the babies I once rocked to sleep, the children I baked cookies for every Sunday, plot to steal everything from me while I was still breathing. They smiled to my face while sharpening knives behind my back. This is the story of how I almost lost everything to the two people I loved most in this world, and how I fought back from the edge of my own grave. Before I begin my story, let me know in the comments where you are listening from. I just want to know I'm not alone in this. And if you feel moved by what you hear, consider subscribing. It helps more people become aware of the reality of elder abuse. Now let me tell you what really happened. The pain in my hip woke me before dawn, as it had every morning since the surgery 3 months ago. I reached for the pills on my nightstand, my fingers trembling not from age but from the cold that seemed to live in my bones now. The house felt different since Robert died, emptier, quieter. The kind of quiet that makes you hear things that aren't there, or maybe things that are. I made my way to the kitchen with my walker, each step a negotiation between my body and my will. The morning light was just beginning to paint the Chicago suburbs in shades of gray and gold. This had been Robert's favorite time of day. He'd sit at this very table with his coffee and the newspaper, reading me the interesting bits while I made breakfast. Now the table felt too big. The kitchen felt too big. Everything felt too big for just one person. That's when I heard the car door slam outside. I glanced at the clock, 6:47 a.m. Who would visit this early? Through the window, I saw them, Alex and Jamie, my grandchildren, walking up the driveway with purpose in their steps. They'd been visiting more often lately, which had warmed my heart at first. After Robert's death and my surgery, I'd felt so alone. Their attention felt like love, but something in the way they walked this morning made my stomach tighten. Grandma. Jamie's voice sang through the door before she even knocked. She had her key. I'd given both twins keys years ago and let herself in. We brought breakfast. Alex followed behind her, carrying a bag from the bakery downtown. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. I'd been noticing that lately, the smile that stopped at his mouth. You didn't need to come so early, I said, settling back into my chair. I'm fine. We'll worry about you, Grandma, Jamie said, kissing my cheek. Her perfume was too strong, or maybe I'd just become more sensitive to smells. Living here all alone after everything. I'm managing, I said, watching as Alex moved through my kitchen like he owned it, pulling out plates, finding the coffee. When had he become so familiar with where everything was? That's actually what we wanted to talk about, Alex said, setting a croissant in front of me. Jamie and I have been thinking. This house is too much for you. All these stairs, the maintenance, and you're not as steady on your feet anymore. I'm healing just fine, I said, defensive. The physical therapist says I'm making excellent progress. Of course you are, Jamie said quickly, too quickly. But wouldn't you be more comfortable somewhere with less responsibility? A nice community where everything's taken care of. Where there are people around. I felt something cold crawl up my spine. You mean a nursing home? An assisted living facility, Alex corrected. They're really nice now, Grandma. Not like the old days. They have activities, social events. I'm not interested, I said, my voice firmer than I felt. This is my home. Robert and I built our life here. They exchanged a look. Quick, but I caught it. A look that said they'd expected this response and had a plan for it. We understand, Jamie said, reaching across the table to pat my hand. We're just worried. You've seemed so confused lately, forgetting things. The bank called us, you know. My heart stopped. The bank called you. Why would the bank call you? Because you're listed as having us as emergency contacts, Alex said smoothly. They said you'd been calling, asking about accounts that don't exist, trying to withdraw unusual amounts. That's not true, I said, but even as I said it, doubt crept in. Had I been confused? There had been that day last week when I couldn't remember if I'd taken my morning pills, and the time I'd found myself in the living room with no memory of why I'd gone there. But calling the bank about accounts that don't exist. No, I would remember that. It's okay to need help, Grandma, Jamie said gently. That's why we're here. We love you. After they left, after more suggestions about looking at options and getting your affairs in order, I sat alone in my kitchen, my breakfast untouched. The house settled around me with its familiar creaks and sighs. And for the first time in 50 years of living here, I felt unsafe in my own home. That night, I dreamed of Robert. He stood at the foot of my bed, just as solid as he'd been in life, wearing his favorite cardigan. But his face was urgent, frightened. He didn't speak. He never spoke in these dreams. But he pointed. Pointed at the dresser, at the bottom drawer where we'd always kept our important papers. I woke with tears on my face and my heart pounding. The red numbers on my clock read 3:33 a.m. I should have gone back to sleep. I should have dismissed it as grief and pain medication and an old woman's fears. But instead, I pulled myself out of bed, made my way to the dresser, and opened that bottom drawer. The folder that should have held our will, our insurance papers, our banking information. It was thinner than I remembered. I pulled it out with shaking hands and spread the contents on the bed. Half the documents were missing. I didn't sleep the rest of that night. I sat on my bed surrounded by papers, trying to remember what was missing. The will was still there. Robert had updated it 2 years before he died. Our insurance policies still there. But bank statements from the last 6 months. Gone. The deed to the house. Gone. The folder where I kept passwords and account numbers. Gone. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. When dawn finally came, I called the only person I could trust. Maggie Chen had lived next door for 15 years. We'd shared countless cups of tea over the fence, watched each other's homes during vacations, celebrated holidays together after Robert died. If anyone would tell me the truth, would tell me if I was losing my mind, it was Maggie. She arrived within 20 minutes, still in her bathrobe, her silver hair uncombed. "Eleanor, what's wrong?" she asked, taking in my face. I must have looked terrible. I told her everything. The missing documents. The twins' strange behavior. The bank supposedly calling them about my confusion. The way they'd looked at each other in my kitchen. Maggie listened without interrupting, her nurse's training showing in the way she observed me, assessed me. When I finished, "Eleanor, how long have I known you?" 15 years. And in those 15 years have you ever seemed confused to me? Forgetful beyond what's normal? Incompetent in any way? No, I said quietly. No, she agreed firmly. You're sharper than people half your age. You do the crossword in pen. You remember everyone's birthdays. You manage your finances, your home, your health. So if someone is telling you that you're confused, that you're calling banks about imaginary accounts, that you need to be put away somewhere, we need to ask ourselves why. The relief that flooded through me was overwhelming. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't losing my mind. "What do?" I asked. Maggie's eyes hardened in a way I'd never seen before. "We figure out what they're up to, and we stop them." The first call I made was to my bank. I asked to speak to a manager, using the voice I'd once used to control a classroom of 30 rowdy teenagers. "Mrs. Hartwell, how can I help you?" The manager, a young woman named Sarah, sounded professional but warm. "I need to know if anyone has called inquiring about my accounts. My grandchildren told me you contacted them about concerns, and I want to verify that." There was a pause. "Mrs. Hartwell, we would never contact family members about your accounts without your explicit written permission. That would violate banking privacy laws." My suspicions crystallized into certainty. "So no one from your bank called my grandchildren?" "Absolutely not. However," she paused again, and I heard keyboard clicking. "Mrs. Hartwell, I do see that someone attempted to access your account information 3 weeks ago. They claimed to be calling on your behalf and had some of your personal information, but we denied the request because they couldn't verify your account password." "Who was it?" The name on the request was Alex Hartwell. He said he had power of attorney. The room tilted. "I haven't given anyone power of attorney." "That's what our records show as well. Mrs. Hartwell, I think you should come in. There are some things we should discuss." That afternoon, Maggie drove me to the bank. Sarah met us in a private office, her expression serious. "Mrs. Hartwell, the attempted access to your accounts is concerning, but there's more. Last week, we received documents by mail claiming to grant Alex and Jamie Hartwell power of attorney over your financial affairs. The signature looked legitimate, but something felt off to me, so I flagged it for review. Our fraud department determined the signature was forged. I felt sick. Forged. We didn't process the documents and we've kept them as evidence. But Mrs. Hartwell, if someone is attempting to gain control of your finances through fraudulent means, you need to take action. Have you considered contacting the police?" I looked at Maggie. She squeezed my hand. "Not yet," I said slowly. "First, I need to understand the full scope of what's happening. Can you tell me if anyone else has tried to access my accounts? Any unusual activity?" Sarah pulled up my account history. "There have been several calls over the past 2 months. Different people, but all claiming to be family members or representatives. We denied all of them. Your accounts are secure, for now," I said quietly. That evening, I sat in my kitchen with Maggie, drinking tea and trying to process everything. My grandchildren, the babies I'd loved, the children I'd helped raise when their parents were too busy, were trying to steal from me. Worse than that, they were trying to take away my autonomy, my independence, my very identity. "Why?" I asked Maggie. "I would have helped them if they needed money. I would have given them anything they asked for. Because what they're after isn't just money," Maggie said gently. "It's everything. Your house, your savings, your control over your own life. And people who want that kind of power don't ask. They take." "What would Robert do?" I wondered aloud. Maggie smiled sadly. "I think Robert is already trying to tell you. That dream, Eleanor, that wasn't just grief. Some part of you knew something was wrong. and your subconscious was trying to warn you. I thought about the dream, about Robert pointing to the drawer, about the missing documents. They took those papers, I said suddenly. They have keys to the house. They've been coming over more often, always with some excuse. They took them. Probably, Maggie agreed. The question is, what are they planning to do with them? I didn't sleep again that night. Instead, I went through every drawer, every file, every corner of my house where Robert and I had kept important documents. More things were missing. My medical records from the surgery, insurance papers, even old family photos, specifically ones that showed me at my most vulnerable, right after Robert died, when grief had carved me hollow. They were building a case. A case that I was incompetent, confused, unable to care for myself. And I realized with horrible clarity that if I didn't stop them, they might succeed. At 2 a.m. my phone rang. I almost didn't answer, but the screen showed Jamie's name. Grandma. Her voice was thick, slurred. She'd been drinking. I need to talk to you. It's 2 in the morning. Jamie, I know. Alex doesn't know I'm calling. Grandma, I think we should slow down. This whole thing with the conservatorship and the doctors and... What conservatorship? My voice was ice. Silence. Then, quietly, nothing. I shouldn't have called. I'm sorry. Jamie, what conservatorship? But she'd already hung up. I sat in the darkness of my bedroom, my phone clutched in my hand, and I knew. They weren't just planning to steal from me. They were planning to have me declared incompetent, to take legal control of my life through a conservatorship, to lock me away somewhere while they liquidated everything Robert and I had built over 50 years of marriage. And I had to stop them before they succeeded. The next morning, I called my attorney, David Rothman. Robert and I had used him for decades. Our wills, property transfers, even a dispute with a contractor once. If anyone could help me understand what I was facing, it was David. Aligner, he said warmly when his secretary put me through. It's been too long. How are you managing? Not well, David. I need your help. I told him everything. The missing documents, the forged power of attorney, the bank's warnings, Jamie's drunken phone call about a conservatorship. As I spoke, I heard his chair creak. He was leaning forward, taking notes. Eleanor, this is serious, he said when I finished. A conservatorship is a legal process where someone is appointed to manage another person's affairs because they're deemed incapable of doing so themselves. If your grandchildren are pursuing this, they'll need medical evidence that you're incompetent. But I'm not incompetent. I know that. But they can shop for doctors who will say otherwise, especially if they're paying them. They can present a narrative, the fall, the hip surgery, living alone, the supposed confusion. They can make it look legitimate. Can my chest tightened? Can they succeed? If they file the petition and you don't contest it vigorously, yes. Conservatorship cases often favor the petitioners, especially when the subject is elderly. The court assumes the family has the person's best interests at heart. He paused. We need to act preemptively. First, I want to see you myself, document that you're of sound mind. Second, we need to secure your assets. And third, we need evidence of what they're doing. How do I get that? That's the difficult part. We need to prove intent, fraud. Do you have access to their communications? Any way to see what they're planning? I thought about the twins' apartment across town. They shared a place in Lincoln Park, had since college. I'd been there a handful of times, usually for holidays. I have a key, I said slowly. To their apartment. Jamie gave it to me years ago in case of emergency. Eleanor. David's voice held a warning. I can't advise you to enter someone's residence without permission. That's legally complicated. But if I happen to find evidence while visiting my grandchildren. He was quiet for a long moment. If you happen to find evidence in plain sight while legitimately visiting, that might be different. But Eleanor, be careful. If they're desperate enough to forge documents and pursue a conservatorship, they might be dangerous. After I hung up, Maggie came over. I told her about the conversation, about the key, about what David had said without saying. You want to go to their apartment? She said. It wasn't a question. I need to know what they're planning. I need proof. Then I'm coming with you. Maggie, you could get in trouble. Aligner Hartwell, we've been neighbors for 15 years. We've been friends for 15 years. You think I'm going to let you do this alone? She crossed her arms. Besides, I'm a witness. If you find something, I can testify that it was there, that you didn't plant it. We waited until Thursday afternoon. I'd called Alex's workplace, a tech startup where he worked in sales, and confirmed he was in the office. Jamie worked from home as a social media consultant, but Thursdays she taught a yoga class downtown from 2 to 4. We'd have a window. The drive across Chicago felt longer than it was. My hip ached from sitting, and my hands were sweating despite the cool October air. Maggie drove carefully, neither of us speaking much. What was there to say? I was about to sneak into my grandchildren's home like a thief, searching for evidence that they were trying to destroy my life. The apartment building was nice, nicer than I'd expected they could afford. Brick facade, security entrance, underground parking. I'd helped them with first and last month's rent when they moved in 5 years ago. Looking at it now, I wondered how many other things I'd paid for without realizing they saw me as a bank, not a grandmother. We took the elevator to the 3rd floor. My hands shook as I fitted the key into their lock. For a moment, I hoped it wouldn't work, that they'd change the locks, that I wouldn't have to go through with this. The lock turned smoothly. The apartment was exactly as I remembered. Modern furniture, everything in shades of gray and white, impersonal as a hotel room. But there were new things too. Empty wine bottles in the recycling. Stacks of papers on the dining table. A laptop left open on the couch. Where do we start? Maggie whispered. The papers, I said, moving toward the dining table. The first stack was bills. Credit card statements with balances that made my stomach turn. Alex owed $47,000 across 3 cards. Phone bills, utility bills, all overdue. A notice about his car being repossessed. The second stack was worse. Medical evaluations. 3 of them, from 3 different doctors I'd never heard of. Each one describing patient Eleanor Hartwell as confused, disoriented, showing signs of dementia. Recommending immediate supervised care. Eleanor. Maggie breathed, reading over my shoulder. These are dated from the last 2 months. You never saw these doctors. Never. My voice was shaking. They're completely fabricated. But they looked real. Official letterhead, signatures, medical jargon. If I didn't know they were lies, I'd believe them myself. Beneath the medical evaluations was a draft petition for conservatorship. I read it with growing horror. It painted me as a confused, vulnerable elderly woman who couldn't manage her own affairs. It cited the fake medical evaluations, claimed I'd been calling the bank about imaginary accounts, suggested I was a danger to myself. It was a complete fiction, but it was convincing. Take pictures, Maggie said urgently, pulling out her phone. Every page. We need evidence. I held up each document while she photographed them. The medical evaluations, the conservatorship petition, bank statements showing their debts. And then, in a folder marked State Planning, we found the real prize. A detailed spreadsheet listing my assets, the house, valued at $680,000. Savings and investment accounts totaling $1.2 million. Robert's life insurance payout. Everything itemized with notes about how quickly each could be liquidated. And at the bottom in Alex's handwriting, timeline file petition Nov 15. Hearing likely Dec 15. Transfer assets by Jan 1. Facility admission by Jan 15. They had a schedule. In their minds, I'd be locked away in a facility by mid-January and they'd have control of everything Robert and I had worked our whole lives to build. There's more, Maggie said, pointing to the laptop on the couch. Eleanor, we should. No, I said quickly. That's going too far, we have what we need. But Maggie was already sitting down, waking the screen. It's already open, Eleanor. I'm not hacking anything. I'm just looking at what's displayed. The screen showed an email chain between Alex and Jamie. I couldn't stop myself from reading. Alex's mom called again. She's asking questions about why we're visiting so much. Jamie, tell her we're worried. Play up the confusion angle. Alex, she's not as confused as we need her to be. Dr. Morrison says we need more evidence of incompetence. Jamie, I'll work on it. Maybe we can get her to sign something while she's on her pain meds. She's always groggy after taking them. Alex, good idea. And keep removing stuff from the house. The more disorganized things seem, the better our case. Jamie, I feel bad about this. Alex, don't. She's gonna leave everything to charity when she dies anyway. We're just getting what should be ours. Jamie, what if she fights the conservatorship? Alex, with what lawyer? We'll have her declared incompetent before she can mount a defense. Trust me, once the petition is filed, it's basically over. Courtside with family. I felt Maggie's hand on my shoulder, steadying me. The room was spinning. These weren't my grandchildren anymore. These were strangers who wore familiar faces, who'd calculated exactly how to steal my life from me. We need to go, Maggie said gently, helping me up. We have enough. We left the apartment exactly as we'd found it, locking the door behind us. In the elevator, Maggie held my hand as tears finally came, not from sadness but from rage. I love them. I whispered. I would have given them anything. I know, Maggie said. But that was never enough. Some people can't accept gifts. They need to take. Back home, I sent all the photos to David Rothman. He called within an hour. Eleanor, this is damning evidence. Forged medical evaluations, fraudulent conservatorship petitions. This is criminal. We can stop them. How? We'll go on offense. We file a restraining order. We report the fraud to the police. We preemptively challenge any conservatorship petition. We show the court exactly what they're doing. He paused. But Eleanor, are you prepared for what this means? You'll be destroying your relationship with your grandchildren. There's no coming back from this. I thought about Alex and Jamie as children. Alex learning to ride a bike in my driveway. Jamie crying on my shoulder after her first heartbreak. Sunday dinners, birthday parties, Christmas mornings. Then I thought about the emails, the spreadsheet, the timeline that ended with me in a facility while they sold my home. They destroyed the relationship first, I said. I'm just refusing to be their victim. Then we fight, David said, and we win. David worked fast. Within 2 days he'd filed a police report about the forged medical documents and the attempted financial fraud. He'd also drafted a cease and desist letter and prepared an emergency petition to prevent any conservatorship filing. But he had one more suggestion. Eleanor, I think we should confront them directly. With me present and with everything recorded. If we can get them to admit what they're planning on tape, it strengthens our case immensely. You want me to invite them here, after everything. I want you to control the narrative before they do. Right now they think they're in charge, they think you're confused, vulnerable, easy to manipulate. Let's use that against them. So I made the call. Jamie answered on the second ring.
Grandma!
How are you feeling? The false sweetness in her voice made my skin crawl, but I kept my own voice soft, uncertain. Not well, sweetheart. I've been so confused lately. You were right. I think I do need help. Can you and Alex come over tonight? I want to talk about the future. About what happens to me. I could practically hear her excitement.
Of course!
We can be there at 7. Grandma, this is the right decision. You'll feel so much better once everything is settled. After I hung up, David arrived with recording equipment. Small devices that looked like decorative items. A pen holder for the coffee table, a picture frame for the mantel. Everything would be captured. Remember, David said as he positioned himself in the dining room, out of sight but within earshot, let them talk. Ask questions. Seem confused, let them think they're convincing you. The more they say, the more evidence we have. Maggie squeezed my hand before leaving. You're stronger than they know. You're stronger than they'll ever be. At exactly 7 p.m., I heard the car doors. Through the window, I watched Alex and Jamie walk up the driveway. They were both smiling. Jamie carried a folder. Probably the documents they wanted me to sign. I opened the door before they could knock, playing the part of the confused, grateful grandmother. Come in, I said, my voice trembling just slightly. Thank you for coming so quickly. Of course, Grandma, Alex said, kissing my cheek. We're always here for you. They settled onto the couch while I took my chair, the walker positioned beside me like a prop in this terrible theater. So, Jamie said gently, you said you've been feeling confused. Yes, I said, letting my hands shake as I reached for my water glass. I found some papers missing from my dresser, and I couldn't remember where I'd put them. And I've been so tired, and sometimes I forget what day it is. That's completely normal after what you've been through, Alex said, leaning forward with false concern. The surgery, losing Grandpa, living alone. It's too much for anyone, especially at your age. We've been talking, Jamie said, opening her folder. And we think we've found a solution. A way to make sure you're safe and cared for, and that all your affairs are properly managed. What kind of solution? Well, Alex said, exchanging a glance with Jamie, there's a legal process called a conservatorship. It means that someone, in this case us, would be appointed to help manage your finances and healthcare decisions, just to take the burden off you. Would I still live here? I asked, making my voice small and uncertain. Eventually, we think a care facility would be better, Jamie said carefully. Somewhere with nurses on staff where you'd have company activities. You mean a nursing home? I let my voice crack. I don't want to leave my house. We know, Grandma, Alex said, reaching over to pat my knee. But this house is too much for you. And honestly, it's worth a lot of money. If we sold it, we could pay for your care and what? I asked softly. What happens to the rest? They both went still, just for a moment. Then Jamie smiled. Well, any remaining funds would be managed as part of your estate. For your benefit, of course. Of course, I echoed. And after I'm gone. Let's not think about that now, Alex said quickly. The important thing is making sure you're safe. Actually, we brought some papers for you to look at. Nothing major, just some preliminary documents. Jamie pulled papers from her folder. I recognized them from the photos Maggie had taken. The conservatorship petition, the fraudulent power of attorney. This one, Jamie said, pointing, just gives us the ability to help manage your bank accounts, pay bills, that sort of thing. And this one starts the process of getting you into a better living situation. I don't know, I said, staring at the papers. It seems like a lot, Grandma. Alex's voice took on an edge. You just told us you've been confused, forgetting things. What if you forget to pay a bill? What if you fall and can't call for help? We're trying to protect you. From what? From yourself, Jamie said, and there it was, the condescension barely hidden beneath the sweetness. You're not young anymore, Grandma. You can't take care of yourself like you used to. Is that what the doctor said? I asked innocently. In those evaluations you had done? Both of them froze. Alex recovered first. What evaluations? The medical evaluations, I said, still playing confused. The ones that say I have dementia and need immediate supervised care. The ones from doctors I've never met. The silence in the room was deafening. Jamie's face had gone pale. Alex's jaw clenched. Grandma, Alex said slowly, I don't know what you're talking about. Don't you? I let my voice harden, dropping the act. The evaluations you forged, the conservatorship petition you drafted, the timeline you made for locking me away and liquidating my assets by January 1st. Jamie stood up abruptly. Wish it down, I said, and something in my voice made her obey. We're not finished. How did you? Alex started, then stopped himself. How did I find out? I smiled, cold and sharp. I may be 75, but I'm not stupid, and I'm certainly not incompetent. I know you took documents from my house. I know you tried to access my bank accounts. I know you forged medical records and a power of attorney. I know everything. Grandma, listen. Jamie tried, but I held up my hand. No, you listen. I loved you. I would have done anything for you. If you'd come to me and said you were in debt, that you needed help, I would have helped you. But instead, you decided to steal from me. To lie about me. To have me declared incompetent and locked away so you could take everything your grandfather and I spent 50 years building. We weren't stealing, Alex said, but his voice lacked conviction. We're family. That money should go to family, not to whatever charities you were planning. How dare you? I said, standing up despite the pain in my hip. That money is mine. This house is mine. My life is mine. You had no right. You're an old woman living in the past. Alex snapped, his mask finally dropping completely. You're alone, you're vulnerable, and whether you admit it or not, you need help. We were trying to help you. Help yourselves, you mean, I said. To my money, my home, my independence. You were going to take everything from me while I was still alive to see it. Jamie was crying now, but they weren't tears of remorse. They were tears of frustration, of anger at being caught. You don't understand the pressure we're under. The debts, the expectations. Then get a job, I said flatly. Work harder, make better choices. But don't steal from your grandmother and pretend it's love. What are you going to do? Alex asked, standing up. There was something ugly in his expression now. Something that made me glad David was in the next room. Go to the police. Tell them your own grandchildren were trying to help you. Actually, David said, stepping into the living room. That's exactly what she's going to do. The color drained from both their faces as they recognized my attorney. Everything you've said tonight has been recorded. David continued calmly, pulling out his phone to stop the recording. Added to the evidence Eleanor already has. The forged documents, the fraudulent medical evaluations, the attempted financial fraud. We have more than enough for criminal charges. You can't. Jamie started. We can, David said. Fraud, forgery, attempted theft, elder abuse. These are serious crimes. You could face Pritis up, Alex said, pointing at me with fury. This was entrapment. This was self-defense, I corrected. You were going to destroy my life. I stopped you. Grandma, please, Jamie said, reaching for me. We're family. You can't do this to family. I stepped back from her touch. You stopped being family the moment you decided I was worth more to you institutionalized than freed. So what now? Alex demanded. You're going to have us arrested. Your own grandchildren. That depends, David said. Eleanor has prepared an agreement. You will both sign cease and desist orders, agreeing never to contact her again, never to pursue conservatorship, never to make any claim on her estate. You'll return all documents you've taken from this house. And you'll both sign confessions acknowledging what you've done. And if we don't? Alex asked. Then we proceed with criminal charges, David said simply. The choice is yours, but I suggest you choose quickly. The police are aware of this situation and are waiting for my call. Jamie looked at Alex. Something passed between them. Calculation, anger, defeat. We need the money, Alex finally said, his voice flat. We're drowning, we thought. You thought it would be easier to steal from an old woman than to fix your own problems. I finished. Sign the papers, Alex. Both of you, and then get out of my house. They signed. David witnessed each signature, each acknowledgement of guilt. And then they stood, gathering their things in silence. At the door, Jamie turned back one last time. I'm sorry, she whispered. No, you're not, I said quietly. You're sorry you got caught. There's a difference. I watched through the window as they drove away, probably for the last time, and I waited to feel sad, to feel the loss of family, the grief of betrayal. Instead, I felt free. The days after the confrontation blurred together. David filed the signed confessions and the restraining orders. The police opened a formal investigation, though David warned me it might not go anywhere. Elder abuse cases were notoriously difficult to prosecute, especially when the perpetrators were family members who could claim they were acting out of concern. I didn't care about prosecution anymore. I cared about protection. Within a week, I'd changed all my locks. Maggie helped me install a security system with cameras at every entrance. I opened new bank accounts and closed the old ones. I updated my will, removing Alex and Jamie completely and leaving everything to charities that helped victims of elder abuse, with a significant bequest to Maggie's family for her loyalty. But the hardest part wasn't the practical measures. It was the silence. No more surprise visits. No more phone calls asking how I was feeling. No more texts with heart emojis and promises to see me soon. The twins had vanished from my life as completely as if they'd never existed, leaving behind only the wreckage of what I'd thought we had. I found myself angry at strange moments. Angry when I made too much coffee because I'd been used to making enough for visitors. Angry when I saw families together at the grocery store. Angry at Robert for dying and leaving me alone to face this. "It's normal," Maggie said one afternoon as we sat in my kitchen, the same kitchen where the twins had sat just weeks ago, plotting my imprisonment. "You're grieving. Not for who they were, but for who you thought they were." "I keep thinking about when they were children," I admitted. "Jamie would bring me dandelions from the yard like they were roses. Alex would save his allowance to buy me presents. Where did those children go? Maybe they were never really there," Maggie said gently. "Or maybe they were and life changed them. Either way, Eleanor, you can't blame yourself. You loved them. You trusted them. That's what grandmothers are supposed to do. And look where it got me." "It got you free," Maggie countered. "Think about it. If you hadn't found out, if you hadn't stopped them, where would you be right now? In some facility, confused and medicated, watching strangers liquidate everything you and Robert built. Instead, you're here in your home, in control of your life. You won." She was right, but winning felt lonelier than I'd expected. The police investigation continued through November. Detective Martinez, a woman in her 40s with kind eyes and a no-nonsense manner, interviewed me 3 times. She collected all the evidence, the forged documents, the recordings, the signed confessions. "Mrs. Hartwell," she said during our last meeting, "I want to be honest with you. Cases like this rarely result in jail time. The perpetrators are usually given probation, community service, maybe restitution. Judges are reluctant to send family members to prison for crimes against the elderly." "Why?" I asked, frustrated. "Because the victims often recant. They forgive. They don't want their children or grandchildren to suffer, even after everything." She looked at me carefully. "Are you prepared to see this through? If we charge them, you'll have to testify. You'll have to face them in court and tell a judge what they did." I thought about Jamie's drunken phone call, the moment of conscience that came too late. I thought about Alex's spreadsheet, my life reduced to numbers and liquidation dates. "I'll testify," I said firmly. "They need to understand there are consequences." But the charges, when they finally came in early December, were lighter than I'd hoped. Attempted fraud, forgery, no mention of elder abuse, which apparently required proof of physical harm or extreme emotional distress that met specific legal definitions. David explained it over the phone. The prosecutor offered them a deal. 18 months probation, 300 hours community service, and they have to attend an ethics course. No jail time, but it'll be on their records. "That's it." My voice was hollow. "After everything they tried to do?" "I'm sorry, Eleanor. The system isn't designed to protect victims like you. It's designed to keep families together, even when those families are toxic." I hung up and sat in the silence of my house. Somewhere in Chicago, Alex and Jamie were celebrating their lenient sentence, probably already planning how to spin this to their friends, to their mother, my daughter-in-law, who I hadn't heard from since the confrontation. Probably she thought I was the villain in this story, the cruel grandmother who turned on her grandchildren. The thought made me laugh, bitter and sharp. I'd been the villain the moment I refused to be their victim. That night, I had another dream about Robert. But this time he was smiling. He sat beside me on the bed, not speaking. He never spoke, but his presence was warm and solid and real. In the dream, I asked him, did I do the right thing? He didn't answer. He just took my hand and held it, the way he'd done for 50 years of marriage, through every crisis and celebration. And I knew that he approved, that he would have done the same thing. That protecting myself wasn't cruelty, it was survival. I woke with tears on my face, but they weren't tears of grief. They were tears of release. Christmas came and went quietly. Maggie invited me to spend it with her family. Her daughter and son-in-law, her 3 grandchildren who were nothing like mine. I watched them together, the easy affection, the genuine laughter, and felt something crack open in my chest. This was what family was supposed to be. On New Year's Eve, Maggie and I sat in my living room with sparkling cider and the TV on mute, counting down to midnight. "What are you hoping for this year?" Maggie asked as the clock approached 12. I thought about it. A year ago I'd been surrounded by people who I thought loved me. Robert in the hospital dying slowly, the twins visiting with their fake concern already forming. A year ago I'd been blind to the danger in my own home. "Peace?" I finally said. "I'm hoping for peace." The countdown began. 10, 9, 8. "You'll find it," Maggie promised. 7, 6, 5. I already have, I realized. 4, 3, 2, 1. The new year arrived with fireworks on the TV and the distant sound of my neighbors celebrating. And I sat in my living room, My home, mine that no one could take from me, and I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Hope. January brought changes. I started going to a senior center 3 times a week. There was a book club, an art class, and a support group for people who'd experienced elder abuse. Sitting in that circle, listening to others tell their stories, children who'd stolen, caregivers who'd neglected, family members who'd isolated and controlled, I realized I wasn't alone. This wasn't rare or unique. It was an epidemic that nobody talked about because the victims were ashamed and the perpetrators were protected by family ties. I started speaking up, first in the support group, then at a local church that invited me to share my story, then a community center, then a library. People listened. They thanked me for my courage. They shared their own stories, suspicions of abuse, signs they'd ignored, fears they couldn't voice. "You're helping people," Maggie said after one of my talks driving me home through February snow. "You turned something terrible into something meaningful." "I'm trying," I said. "But it doesn't erase what happened. It doesn't bring back the grandchildren I thought I had." "No," Maggie agreed. "But it might save someone else's grandmother from going through the same thing." In March, I received a letter. No return address, postmarked from Indiana. Inside was a single piece of paper with handwriting I recognized. "Grandma, I know I don't have the right to contact you, and if you want to report this to your lawyer, I understand. I just needed you to know that I'm sorry. Really sorry. Not sorry I got caught, sorry for what I did. Alex and I aren't speaking anymore." After everything happened, I realized how far we'd fallen. How we'd justified everything by telling ourselves you'd never miss the money, that you'd be better off in a facility, that we deserved it after everything our family had been through. But we didn't deserve it. We didn't deserve anything except what we earned ourselves. And we definitely didn't deserve you. I've been going to therapy, working through a lot of things. Debt, bad decisions, the way I let Alex lead me into darker and darker places. I'm not making excuses. I made my own choices. But I wanted you to know that I'm trying to be better. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't even expect a response. I just wanted you to know that I'm sorry, and that I hope you're happy. You deserve better than what we gave you. Jamie. I read the letter 3 times, then put it in a drawer. I didn't respond. I didn't know if I believed her, didn't know if remorse that came after consequences was real or just another manipulation. But I kept the letter. Not because I was ready to forgive, but because maybe, someday, I would want to remember that even people who hurt us deeply are still people. Still capable of growth, if not redemption. Spring came slowly to Chicago the way it always did. Fall starts and sudden freezes, days of warmth followed by bitter cold. But eventually the crocuses pushed through the half-frozen ground in my garden, and the world turned green again. I turned 76 in April. Maggie threw me a small party at her house with her family and some friends from the senior center. There was cake, laughter, terrible jokes. Nobody mentioned the twins. Nobody asked about my family. These people knew my story, and they accepted me exactly as I was, a woman who'd survived, who'd fought back, who was building a new life from the ruins of the old one. "Make a wish," Maggie's youngest granddaughter said, her face eager in the candlelight. I closed my eyes. A year ago, I would have wished for reconciliation, for the twins to come back changed and sorry, for family to mean what I'd always believed it meant. Now I wished for strength, for continued independence, for the wisdom to see danger before it could hurt me again. I blew out the candles, and everyone cheered. My physical therapy had progressed well. I no longer needed the walker, just a cane on bad days. I could drive again, which meant freedom. The grocery store, the library, the senior center, all accessible without depending on anyone else. Independence had never felt so precious. In May, David called with news. The probation department contacted me. "Alex has violated the terms of his probation, missed community service hours, failed to complete the ethics course. There's a hearing scheduled, and they may impose harsher penalties." "What does that mean?" "Possibly jail time. 6 months, maybe a year. Eleanor, they'll likely ask if you want to speak at the hearing. To tell the judge how this affected you." I thought about it for a long time. Part of me wanted to see Alex face real consequences, wanted him to understand that actions had weight, that he couldn't charm his way out of everything. But another part of me was tired. Tired of being defined by what had happened, tired of carrying anger like a stone in my chest. "I don't want to go," I finally said. "Whatever the court decides, that's between them and Alex. I'm not interested in revenge anymore. I just want to move forward." "Are you sure? This is your chance to be heard." "I've been heard," I said. "By the people who matter, by the support groups I speak to, by the women who thank me for sharing my story. Alex can face the court without me." David was quiet for a moment. "That takes a lot of strength, Eleanor. Or maybe I just don't want to waste any more of my life on people who tried to take it from me." The hearing happened without me. Alex got 4 months in county jail. Jamie, who'd completed all her probation requirements and enrolled in community college, got her probation terminated early. The system had decided their fates, and I was at peace with staying out of it. Summer brought a new project. The senior center asked if I'd be willing to lead a workshop on financial safety for older adults. How to protect yourself from scams, from predatory family members, from anyone who saw vulnerability as opportunity. I'm not an expert. I protested to Clara, the center's director. You're a survivor, Clara said firmly. And that makes you exactly the expert we need. So I started teaching. Once a month, a dozen or so seniors would gather in the center's community room, and I'd walk them through everything I'd learned. How to secure your accounts. How to recognize warning signs of financial abuse. How to have difficult conversations with family members about money and inheritance. How to protect yourself legally. And every session, someone would stay after to tell me their own story. A sister who'd stolen from a joint account. A son who'd forged his mother's signature on a reverse mortgage. A daughter-in-law who'd isolated her husband's father and drained his savings. What did you do? They'd ask me. How did you survive it? And I'd tell them the truth. I stopped making excuses for people who hurt me. I stopped prioritizing family loyalty over my own safety. I asked for help, and I fought back. Some of them cried. Some of them thanked me. Some of them never came back, not ready to face the truth that the people they loved might be hurting them. But some of them did come back. And they'd tell me they'd secured their accounts, updated their wills, had hard conversations. They'd tell me they felt safer, stronger, more in control. You're making a real difference, Maggie said one evening as we sat on my porch with iced tea, watching the neighborhood kids play in the street. I'm just talking about what happened to me. That's how change starts? Maggie said, one person brave enough to tell the truth. In August, my daughter-in-law finally reached out. Susan, Alex and Jamie's mother, my son's widow. We hadn't spoken since the confrontation. I'd tried calling a few times in those early weeks, but she never answered, never called back. Now 8 months later, she wanted to meet for coffee. I almost said no. The twins had learned their behavior somewhere, and I suspected their mother had taught them that emotional manipulation was love, that guilt was currency, that family meant never being held accountable. But curiosity won out. We met at a cafe downtown, neutral territory. Susan looked older than I remembered, or maybe I'd just never noticed the hardness around her eyes, the calculation, her smile. Eleanor, she said, embracing me like we were still family. You look well. I am well, I said, not returning the embrace. We sat with our coffees, an awkward silence stretching between us. I wanted to apologize, Susan finally said, for the twins. For everything that happened. They're my children and I raised them better than that. Did she? I wondered. Or did she raise them exactly like that? They're adults, I said neutrally. They made their own choices. I know, but still. Family should stick together. I hate that this has divided us all. There it was. The real reason for this meeting. Not apology but manipulation. Not accountability, but an attempt to smooth things over, to pretend nothing had happened. Susan, I said carefully, your children tried of me, declared incompetent and locked away so they could steal my life savings. That's not a family disagreement. That's a crime. But they were under so much pressure. So am I interrupted. Every day. The pressure of being a widow, of managing chronic pain, of living alone. But I don't plot to destroy other people's lives. Susan's face tightened. You had Alex sent to jail. No, I didn't. His own actions did that. He violated his probation because he couldn't follow simple rules, even after he got away with a slap on the wrist for what he tried to do to me. Has your grandson? He stopped being my grandson when he saw me as a bank account with a pulse. We stared at each other across the table, two women who would never understand each other, because we operated from completely different definitions of family. So that's it, Susan asked. You're just cutting us all off. After everything? After everything. I repeated, incredulous. Susan, your children tried to institutionalize me and steal everything Robert and I built over 50 years. And you're acting like I'm the problem for refusing to pretend it didn't happen. Family forgives, Susan said, her voice cold now. Family doesn't betray, I countered. And since your children did betray me, spectacularly, forgiveness isn't something they've earned. Susan stood abruptly. I thought you'd be reasonable. I thought we could work this out. There's nothing to work out. Your children will serve their consequences, and I'll live my life without them in it. That's already worked out. She left without another word. I sat alone with my coffee watching people pass by on the street. People with their own families, their own complications, their own betrayals and loyalties. And I felt nothing but relief that I'd never have to have that conversation again. Japadiar 70 NC 3 years passed. 3 years of teaching my workshops, of speaking at churches and community centers, of slowly, carefully building a life that belonged entirely to me. 3 years of watching Maggie's grandchildren grow, of birthday parties and holidays spent with chosen family instead of blood relatives. 3 years of healing. I was 79 now, and my body reminded me of it every morning. The hip still ached when it rained. My hands weren't as steady as they'd been. But my mind was sharp, sharper than it had ever been. Survival had honed it into something precise and unforgiving. The senior center had grown my workshop into a full program. We'd helped dozens of seniors protect themselves from financial abuse. We'd connected with legal aid organizations, with adult protective services, with elder law attorneys who offered free consultations. What had started as me sharing my story had become something larger, something that might actually change how our society thought about elder abuse. You've created a legacy, Clara told me at the program's 3rd anniversary celebration. Something that will outlast all of us. That's all I wanted, I said. To turn something terrible into something meaningful. It was October again. 3 years since the night I dreamed of Robert pointing at the drawer. 3 years since I'd discovered the missing documents. The leaves were falling from the trees outside my window, carpeting the yard in gold and crimson. I stood there watching them, thinking about cycles and seasons and how everything that dies makes room for something new. The doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone. Maggie was visiting her daughter in California. My workshop wasn't until Tuesday. I considered not answering. I was comfortable, and unexpected visitors always carried the possibility of trouble. But curiosity won, as it often did. Through the peephole, I saw a young man I didn't recognize. Late 20s, disheveled clothes, nervous energy. My hand went to my phone, ready to call for help if needed. Mrs. Hartwell, he called through the door. My name is Marcus Chen. I'm Maggie's nephew. She asked me to deliver something to you. I'm Maggie's nephew. I relaxed slightly and opened the door, chain still attached. Identification, I asked. He smiled. A good smile, genuine, and held up his driver's license. Marcus Chen, just as he'd said. I checked it carefully, then opened the door fully. I'm sorry to bother you, he said. Aunt Maggie said you'd be cautious. She wanted me to tell you she sends her love and she'll call you tonight. What did she need you to deliver? He held out a large envelope. This came to her house by mistake. It's addressed to you, but with her address. The mailman keeps mixing up your houses. I took the envelope. No return address, postmarked from Oregon. My name in handwriting I half recognized. Thank you, Marcus. No problem. Aunt Maggie talks about you all the time. Says you're the bravest person she knows. After he left, I sat in my living room with the envelope in my lap. I knew that handwriting, older now, shakier but unmistakably Alex's. I almost threw it away unopened. I'd received Jamie's letter 3 years ago and never responded. I didn't need Alex's attempts at redemption or reconciliation. I didn't need his apologies or excuses. But something made me open it anyway. Maybe curiosity. Maybe the desire to know if he'd changed. Maybe just the remnants of the grandmother who'd once loved him. Inside was a letter and a check. The check was for 47 aldozu. The exact amount Alex had owed on his credit cards 3 years ago, made out to me, signed by Alex Hartwell. The letter was short. Grandma Eleanor, I don't expect you to cash this check. I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't even expect you to read this letter. But I needed to try. 3 years ago, I was the worst version of myself. Desperate, entitled, willing to destroy you to save myself. I've spent the last 3 years, including 4 months in jail, trying to understand how I became that person. The answer is complicated and painful and involves a lot of therapy I should have gotten years ago. But the simple truth is, I chose to hurt you. I chose greed over love. I chose easy money over integrity. And I will regret those choices for the rest of my life. I'm writing from Oregon. I moved here after my probation ended, got a job in construction, started over where nobody knew me or what I'd done. I've been saving every extra dollar for 3 years to pay back the amount I tried to steal from you. It's not enough. Nothing could be enough. But it's what I owe. Jamie and I don't speak anymore. We tried, right after everything happened. But we were too tangled up in what we'd done together. She went her way, I went mine. I heard she finished her degree and moved to Arizona. I hope she's doing better than I am. Mom still thinks you're the villain in this story. She tells people you turned on your family for no reason, that you had us arrested over a misunderstanding. I don't correct her anymore. Let her believe what she needs to believe. But I know the truth. You were a victim and you refused to stay one. You fought back and you survived, and you turned your survival into something that helps other people. I've followed your workshops from afar. There was an article about you in a Chicago community paper last year. You're doing important work. I don't know what else to say except I'm sorry. I'm sorry for the betrayal, for the fear I caused you, for the pain that my greed inflicted. I'm sorry that I destroyed our relationship over money I didn't earn and didn't deserve. If you want to cash the check, please do. If you want to donate it to your elder abuse programs, that would be fitting. If you want to tear it up and never think about me again, I understand that too. I just needed you to know that I remember who you were to me before I ruined everything. I remember Sunday dinners and birthday cakes, and the way you always had butterscotch candies in your purse. I remember being loved by you, and I remember throwing that love away for a spreadsheet full of numbers. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm just saying I'm sorry, and I'll spend the rest of my life trying to be someone who deserves to have been your grandson. Alex, I read the letter twice, then sat in silence while the afternoon light shifted across my living room floor. Was this real? Or was it another manipulation, another attempt to get back into my good graces, back into my will? I didn't know. Maybe I'd never know. But the check was real. A $47,000, 3 years of saving, if his letter was true. 3 years of construction work and rent and groceries, and somehow still putting aside money to repay a debt he could have walked away from. That was something. Maybe not redemption, but something. I thought about what to do with it. I could cash it, but I didn't need the money. I could donate it to the senior center programs, let Alex's guilt fund the protection of other grandmothers. Or I could do something else entirely. The next day, I called David Rothman. Eleanor, good to hear from you. What can I do for you? I need you to set up a trust. I said, a small one. $47,000. It's for educational purposes, tuition, books, legitimate living expenses only. No access to the principal. Just distributions for verified educational costs. For whom? Alex Hartwell. Silence on the other end. Eleanor, are you sure? I'm not forgiving him, I said clearly. I'm not reconciling with him. I'm not inviting him back into my life. But if he's genuinely trying to rebuild himself, to become someone better, then maybe he deserves a chance to finish that work. An education. A real foundation for a different life. This is remarkably generous considering what he did to you. It's not generosity, I corrected. It's investment. In the possibility that people can change. That's all it is, possibility, not certainty. If he doesn't use it, the money reverts to my estate. If he does use it, maybe he becomes someone who contributes instead of takes. David agreed to set it up. The trust would be anonymous. Alex would never know it came from me. He'd just receive a letter explaining he'd been selected for an educational grant for formerly incarcerated individuals seeking to rebuild their lives. If he used it, good. If he didn't, the money would eventually go to my elder abuse programs anyway. I never responded to his letter. I put it in the drawer with Jamie's letter from 3 years ago. Evidence of remorse, maybe, or evidence of continued manipulation. Time would tell. That night, I dreamed of Robert for the first time in months. We were young again, sitting on the porch of our first apartment, drinking cheap wine and planning our future. In the dream, I told him everything. About the twins, about the betrayal, about the workshops, about the trust. He listened the way he always had, with his full attention, his hand holding mine. Did I do the right thing? I asked him, the same question I'd asked 3 years ago. This time he smiled. And in that dream logic way that makes perfect sense while you're sleeping, I understood what he meant. There was no single right thing. There was only the choice to survive, to protect yourself, to turn pain into purpose, and to leave the door open. Just a crack, for the possibility of redemption, while never forgetting the reality of betrayal. I woke up with morning light streaming through my window and Maggie's voice in my head from years ago. You've created a legacy. Not the legacy I'd imagined when Alex and Jamie were children. When I'd pictured them growing into good people who'd remember me fondly, who'd carry on the values Robert and I had tried to instill. But a legacy nonetheless. One built on survival and truth, telling. One that helped strangers protect themselves from the kinds of betrayals I'd endured. One that said you are worth protecting, even from your own family, especially from your own family. I got up, made my coffee and looked at my calendar. Workshop on Tuesday, book club on Wednesday, lunch with some friends from the senior center on Friday. My life, full and purposeful and entirely my own. At 79, I'd finally inherited exactly what Robert and I had always meant to leave behind: freedom, security, and the knowledge that I was stronger than anything that tried to break me. The whispered inheritance wasn't the money or the house or the material things Alex and Jamie had tried to steal. It was this: the absolute certainty of my own worth, and the refusal to let anyone, family or otherwise, convince me I was worth less than everything. That was the inheritance I'd leave behind. Not to blood relatives who'd seen me as an obstacle, but to every person who heard my story and found the courage to protect themselves. To every grandmother who learned to say no. To every elder who refused to be a victim. To everyone who understood that sometimes, the bravest thing you can do is walk away from people who are supposed to love you, and build a life that belongs entirely to yourself. That was my whispered inheritance. And it was worth more than any amount of money they could have stolen. Eleanor Hartwell lived independently in her Chicago home until she was 87, when she passed away peacefully in her sleep. Her estate funded the Eleanor and Robert Hartwell Foundation for Elder Protection, which continues to provide education, legal support, and resources to seniors facing financial abuse. The foundation has helped thousands of people protect themselves and prosecute those who prey on the vulnerable. Alex Hartwell completed a degree in social work and now works as an advocate for rehabilitation programs for white-collar criminals. He never knew the educational trust came from his grandmother. Jamie Hartwell became a licensed therapist specializing in family dynamics and financial trauma. She has never returned to Chicago. Margaret Maggie Chen remained Eleanor's closest friend until the end, and her family received a substantial bequest that allowed her great-grandchildren to attend college debt-free. The workshops Eleanor started continue at senior centers across Chicago and have expanded to 12 other cities. Every session begins with the same words: you are worth protecting, you are worth fighting for, and you are never too old to say no.